This is a Tab Media special report in conversation with SBC President Ed Litton. I'm your host, Jennifer Rash. Dr. Litton, thanks for joining us.
Well, it's good to be with you, Jennifer.
All right, so we are just about 24 hours out from your big announcement, and where you sent a video message out to all Southern Baptists explaining that you have decided not to run for the second term as SBC president, and we'll get into all of that and talk through that. But I wanted to know, just at this 24-hour mark, what has it been like as far as the feedback and the response and the different reactions you've received?
Mostly very encouraging, and it's a lot of encouragement from friends, but even beyond that, people that are acquaintances and people I don't know have just been thankful for terms of service. That's how Southern Baptists are.
Yeah.
One of my fathers in the ministry is Dr. Jimmy Draper, and he told me a couple of months ago, he said, "Ed, people are praying for you." And I said, "I know, Brother Jimmy." He said, "You don't have a clue." He said, when I stopped being president, it was like somebody unplugged the refrigerator. He said it's powerful.
Wow.
People who don't know you are praying for you. And that says something about how unified we really are. I know we can be very disunified and contentious, but I just appreciate that. I hope people don't stop praying, because we have a lot of work to do. And I'm not leaving the role or the position, and we will follow through to Anaheim. But, as political things go at times, I think it's important that the president not have to run for the office.
Right.
And there's been a lot of thoughts about that. And I feel like God has given me a focus in particular, besides the report, but it is to seek to present to the Southern Baptist people a plan for racial reconciliation. This is something our convention has been asking for. And I believe God has uniquely positioned me and given me experiences in this, that we can, with the help of a lot of good people, present a simple grassroots effort that I think will make a huge difference in the future for us.
And I noticed that you said yesterday that you feel like that your leadership will do better, or your influence will be better in the local church role as a pastor.
Yeah, because we're a convention of people, but we're a convention that honors the role of pastor.
Right.
And we're very serious about that. And I believe that pastors have tremendous influence, not just in their local communities, but in the leadership of the SBC. And so it's been an honor. It is an honor to serve as president. It's rare. I'm the 63rd president in our long, very storied history. And so that is no small thing. And nor do I diminish the office. I think the office is powerful. The office has tremendous influence. But that's why Southern Baptists choose a pastor to do it typically, because we believe in that role. In my role here in Mobile, we've been leading in this area, and we have a tremendous team of multi-churches, denominations, and people that are working for that reconciliation issue. And then I think that same influence, now having had this office, I think could help us further it along. And we're going to make a presentation in Anaheim to present this plan for Southern Baptists to receive it and to accept it, do what they wish with it. My hope and prayer is then my job is to encourage people to follow through and to begin movements of God in our cities.
That is something you've been talking about even before you were elected SBC president. I looked back at some of the articles and news conferences, interviews, that kind of thing, that some of us had done with you before in June 8th, actually, right before the SBC Annual Meeting in Nashville. We asked you from the Baptist paper and the Alabama Baptist, what do you hope to bring to Southern Baptists if you are elected president? And I'll read your answer. And the way you answered was, I hope to bring a vision of reaching out to our neighbors and challenging our churches to not be isolated from those in our communities who do not look like us or may not think or vote like us.
Right,
and you went on to talk about gospel reconciliation and all of that. And then I thought it was interesting that, that was how you answered the question straight up. And you had also talked about unity and diversity and different things with in other interviews. And then as you got into your year as president, so many different things happened, and we've referenced that in the previous interview you did. You were gracious to talk about how you dealt with the preparation and delivery of sermons and the questions that came with that, and
Right.
how you worked through all of that. The executive committee situation in September and how all of that played out. And then it's been rolling at an interesting level for 8 months now. And so did you what was it like thinking about what you thought you might get to do as president and then what
Hmm.
actually happened? And then how did that kind of come together to your decision yesterday?
Well, historically, and I've had other
Mm.
SBC presidents tell me this, it's been my privilege through the years to know several and to know them personally and well enough that they've shared things with me even before I became president. That sometimes history projects onto the president what his issues are going to be.
Okay.
And I definitely think that's the case in my case.
Mhm.
But I think, especially in the area of sexual abuse
Mhm.
and appointing the task force, which let me just say, I could not be more satisfied with the character of the people that are leading that task force, the people of that task force. I think they've done an exceptional job. And I think they will continue to do that. The report is going to be very important. Southern Baptists are going to want to know what that report says and what it means, and then what we can do afterwards. One of the things, Jennifer, I've been telling people, I said this at the EC meeting, is I want to encourage Southern Baptists, don't brace for impact like
Mhm.
we're getting ready to have a car crash.
Right.
Brace for action. And so brace to act. In other words, when we receive that report, and we'll have time to read it and before we gather, but when the report's made, there's going to be suggestions on what we do from here. And so Southern Baptists need to respond to act. And it's going to take a long time for us to work through this, to find healing and everything else involved, but to change the culture of the SBC, be willing to hear what God's going to say to us through that report. That being said, that's one of those historic moments
Mhm.
that we really that is thrust on a president. But what's been on my heart from the very beginning is that this racial reconciliation would be an issue, and for the same reasons I said in June in the interview with you. I see a pattern in my own church. I see a pattern in other churches where I speak and pastors that I know, that we have been as Southern Baptists slowly moving into a place where we no longer have connections with unsaved people in our neighborhoods, our communities. We don't know who our neighbors are, and most of our time and effort is spent at church with people that are good friends, close friends, important friends. But we need to re-engage with lostness. We need to re-engage with real people, and to be able to love them and serve them, and to be able to share the love of Jesus Christ with them. And so actually, my hope in this racial reconciliation is that a side effect will be that we'll begin seeing people in our communities that we are disconnected from. And in the process, we'll see needs that need to be addressed. And as our churches move to do that, to make it a better community, to help people that are suffering injustices and difficulties, that we'll find greater opportunities to share the gospel.
Mhm.
And that's why another reporter asked me recently about, what do I mean when I talk about gospel reconciliation? Well, the gospel is all about reconciliation. We're ambassadors of reconciliation. And then we need the gospel to bring people to the Lord, and we need the gospel to help believers reconnect and forgive and go forward together.
Mm. Yeah, and that makes me think, when you were, I hate to say running, but when you were announcing and
Right.
sharing about
Right.
uh, who is Ed Litton, trying to let Southern Baptists know. Again, you pointed out four specific things. You said you had four priorities as SBC president: unity, gospel engagement, diversity, and planting, and revitalization. And so you
Mhm.
always weave back to all of those. Well, one thing that I remember from the presidential press conference right after the election took place, and again, it was a tight election. You run on a second ballot, won on a second ballot with, I believe, 52% of the vote. So it was tight.
Right. Right. Right.
But you were sharing a lot about unity and how you really wanted that to happen. Can you share with us what you were able to do or are still planning to do as far as reaching across the aisle to help
Right.
figure out some of those moments of um, making that happen?
Yeah, that you can't do. JD Greer told me, he said don't come up with six things that you're going to do. He said you may be lucky to do two. And he's right. I think the unity part is a two-way street. and we can reach out, we can do our best. I'm not sure that I did everything possible that I could have possibly done with that, but there have been efforts to do that. There have been efforts to connect even among my own officers, but that are, from that group, and just learn to love and respect this man and the other men that serve with me. But I would say the other thing that you mentioned that we are making headway with is an initiative to try to plant 50 more churches in California, 50 above what the Send Network has. And I was just out there last week, met with a group of pastors that are looking to come and help support church plants. And we're going to make that a focus at the Anaheim convention. But, we're not going to hit all the goals. I don't want to be a divisive person in any way, shape, or form. But I felt like we had some serious issues we had to address. And looking back, I would probably say I wish there had been more time for talks, sitting down, and maybe doing things that would help bring unity.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, how about 8 months and 2/3 of the way in, grade yourself as an SBC president?
Nah, I'm not going to do that. Listen, it's not that things like that don't matter to me, but I can't let my heart become consumed with that. There's work to do, and these goals are too important. It's not about me, and I really believe that. And that's not to say there's not a battle within me.
Right.
But, it's funny. I said something at the chapel at Sanford yesterday. I said, in life, when I was your age, talking to college students, I wanted a platform. And here's what I would have said. I want a platform from which I can glorify God. But sometimes God has an altar and not a platform. And so he is glorified as he chooses to be glorified.
Well, and the technical role of SBC president is to appoint some strategic committees that are vital,
Right.
and to preside over the annual meeting.
Mhm.
So technically, if you make it to Anaheim and everything works out, you will check the boxes. But as you mentioned with JD Greer, having a couple of things you want to accomplish, I think that has become part of the informal part of the role, is to have a couple of platform issues to work with. So it has been interesting to watch what was thrust upon you, and then what also kind of happened, and how it's all surfacing.
Yeah, and that happens. That's the way it typically happens for the SBC president, and not to over glamorize this role, but it's what happens with the U.S. president. Abraham Lincoln did not want to fight the Civil War. He wanted to build a transcontinental railroad. That was his dream, and he never got to fulfill that dream because history happens.
Good point. And so, and then also just things like you may not, be thinking about going into these roles too. You're thinking about serving, and you're thinking about all the different parts and pieces. But when something personally also happens, as you experience, how would you advise future people who are going to consider being in this role to think about those things as they go in?
Well, the political climate we live in today means you're going to be scrutinized in ways you never imagined. And so if you're not up for that game, don't do it. But let me say this too. Adrian Rogers was right. It's best if men don't seek this office. It really is. And that's not exactly how he said it. But what he said was the office seeks the man doesn't seek the office. And I want to say with all of my heart, it was never my intention to run for president of the SBC. If I'd ever entertained the thought, I'd given up on it, because it was just it's not, in my opinion, something you do for power, for fame, or for any other reason, for self-glory. I think at the end of the day, this is a great people. And they deserve to be led well. And I really didn't grasp how powerful these people were to love you, even from a distance, until my wife died. I have boxes here in my office of prayer cards that came from churches. and from prayer ministries. I have 2 whole boxes from Bellevue Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee, who has always had a historic prayer ministry. And there's no way I can even read. There's so many of them. I can read all of them, but I felt a sense of the surrounding of this family. They are on mission. They are people who are broken and flawed, just like all of us are, but they deserve to be led well. And they deserve to be led by someone God chooses. And and I believe that happens. Even when men try to interject political things into the system, we know that God is sovereign. And so we
Yeah.
can trust him.
Yeah, and I've heard you share that story before, and one setting you shared how the family, the SBC family, loved you, and
Mm,
that was part of the reason you were glad to give back. But you also said, as family, we don't give up on one another.
right. It's
Do
true.
you still believe that?
I do. Oh, yeah. One of the things I've avoided, tried to avoid, and I would continue to work hard to avoid, is inviting people to leave. I don't
Mm,
do that in my church, and I don't do that in the SBC. And I'll tell you what else I don't do, I can't do. It would show a wickedness in my heart that I can't, I don't want to even fathom. Not that my heart isn't and can't be. That's what bothers me.
mhm.
I'm prone to wonder, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love, but I'm here to tell you, we should never celebrate people leaving. It is failure for a child of God, blood bought, to celebrate when someone leaves. It is a failure of the core doctrine of who Jesus is. So it's something we should grieve. It's something we should say, what went wrong? What can we do better? What can we learn from? But it reveals something about us that should frighten us if we find ourselves celebrating anybody leaving. Come, let us reason together. And so we serve the greatest king in the world. And just like his early disciples, we act so unlike him at times that he just has to rebuke us.
Right. Mm.
So
Well, one other thought that I was curious about, as SBC president, I'm sure you learned a lot about all the inner workings and different parts and pieces. Now, you've talked about a lot of the disaster relief that you got to experience and different things. Do you Would you say that you have a greater appreciation for all levels of the work happening in Southern Baptist life now that you've served in this role and been able to
yeah,
just see it from the glimpses that you would get to see it from?
absolutely. And I'm going to tell you, I probably, the one area that has increased the best for me, or the most for me, has been our state level conventions. Uh, I have gotten to know the executive directors of all of our states at some level, and at least casually meeting them.
Right.
These are serious people, and they are serious about the gospel, and they are serious about cooperation. They have profound concerns about the national organization, and they care. And I think that's been very heartening for me. I think on the association level, the association's a different animal, and it struggles differently. I think there's a lot of concern, fear that our associations are just disappearing. But yet I think there's hope for rebirth and revival in that. What we need is the interjection of new blood and younger vision for our associations. We still need an association on every community level. Now, I'm going to tell you why this is important. Because even as we address the issues of discipline within the community
Mhm.
of Southern Baptist, Great Commission Baptist, most of the things that we want to address from a national level that our polity really doesn't give us the right to do can
Mhm.
be handled on an associational level. But
Mm.
the association has to be run by the same scripture, that we love one another, so that if a brother is in error in his leadership, in his preaching, or whatever, that he's confronted personally, privately, Matthew 18, and that he's dealt with on that level. And now we're asking, and there's danger in this, that we're asking the national entities, to the executive committee and credentials committee in particular, to investigate things now beyond sexual abuse.
Mm.
And I just think it's cautionary. I think my statement is cautionary. We need to be careful. And so we need a vibrant associational ministry. We need a vibrant state conventions, and we need a vibrant national convention.
And is that in
I would
the
say this: above all, Baptists need to keep being Baptist. We don't need to pretend we're somebody else.
Yeah.
Years ago, I wrote a little statement to myself. I said, the best Baptist wants to be somebody other than a Baptist. And I that's not true of everybody. I love Southern Baptists. I have a greater appreciation. There's not an ounce of cynicism in my heart towards Southern Baptists at all. And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this family. When I share my personal testimony, I tell people they're the ones who came to get us. We were lost pagans in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and a Southern Baptist pastor shared the gospel with my dad and brought Jesus into our house.
Wow. That is always encouraging to know the connection and how we all got here and where we are. I wanted to jump back really quickly on the note about being cautious. Flesh that out for me just a little bit as far as from a denominational standpoint, because we are down up in the way we are set up. What are some of the fears that if we have too many restrictions from the denominational office?
Well, there are calls to use, and we understand why the Credentials Committee was charged to do this. We understand that it was an important way to deal with sexual abuse charges and claims. But it makes all of us nervous from the standpoint of our polity. We don't want to interrupt that ascending descending issue. So that being said, the danger, I think, could be in just venturing out into new areas. If we have disagreement or a broadness on the role of women in the Baptist faith and message, then we want to narrow that down using somebody else to police it. And that's not, I don't think, the best way to approach this. We need a healthy conversation about that. And hopefully, I think we will. That's another issue that I may still have a part in helping engender a conversation that Southern Baptists need to have about the role of women in our convention.
How do we get to the point where we can actually have these calm, healthy conversations without there being so much toxicity?
I think it would help all of us if we tone down the rhetoric.
Yeah.
You never have a good conversation when you call somebody names. You never have a good conversation when you hurl insults or you hurl allegations of liberalism or anything else. And so it starts, if you want to be reasonable, let's sit down and talk reasonably. I think there's, some may think that the seminary is the only place we can have this conversation. I don't think so. I think Southern Baptists have been blessed. We've got great seminary training. We're probably the most educated pastorally that we've ever been. And I'm grateful for that. So let's sit down and reason. Paul told the church at Corinth, he said, you people are going to be judging angels someday. Why can't you work this stuff out? And so let's have a conversation, but let's do it like Jesus would do it. Do it like Jesus is at the table, and he is.
And that makes me think of your note about this role of the associations. Maybe that's a good spot. So it's a little more manageable and not so many people trying to have a voice at the table. But
well, especially because, we're in a vastly different world than we were in 1845. And it's a very diverse world. And so there are community issues in Southern California that we don't have in South Alabama. And so who's the best person or people to have that conversation for churches in Southern California? I think it's the people who live there and the people who work together, that know one another, who love one another, and yet are committed to truth. And so we need a good, honest conversation. It's just hard to even imagine how that could be possible in the tone of things right now.
So true.
But I believe all things are possible with God.
Well, thank you for helping us have a conversation and to maybe get that ball rolling.
That'd be great.
All right. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it too. God bless you.